Hello everyone and welcome to this review for Rise of the Shadows for Hunter. We're going to be going over all the cards individually and then talk a bit about the class as a whole. We're going to be using a 1 to 5 rating system, 1 being the worst, kind of being trash, 5 being meta-defining cards. If you want to find out more details, you can look in the YouTube description below to find out more info about the review, or you can go back to our neutral review and check it out there where I kind of explained the review system. So let's get started. First up, we have Varisa Windrunner. Varisa Windrunner is a 7 mana 5/6 legendary minion with Battle Cry. Equip Thor Adal, the Star's Fury. So if we have a look at Thor Adal here, Thor Adal is a 3 mana 2/3 weapon. After your hero attacks, gain +2 spell damage this turn. So this is the one card that gives you like directly spell damage, which is kind of I think why they worded some of the other spell damage cards a bit. So some of the other cards that required spell damage a bit differently. But that's an interesting side note. 7 mana 5/6, obviously not good enough for Hunter. We want to be playing much better tempo cards than most of our Hunter decks. The spell damage is quite interesting. I mean, Kill Command is kind of by far the most played spell or damage dealing spell. The spell damage does synergize fairly well with cards like Baited Arrow, where upping the spell damage on that means you're dealing 5 damage, so it's much easier to get the overkill off. That's kind of probably one of the best uses I see for activating the Thor Adal. Obviously, Arcane Shot, we're talking 1 mana 4 damage. That's pretty powerful. I mean, we're also looking at some of the other spells we're going to see later, but which is 4 mana for 4 damage to a minion. And then there's also Wing Blast still, which can go down to 1 mana if a minion's died. So we could, even just 4 mana 6 damage to a minion, it's kind of okay. I think that this is really a card that helps the much slower build of Hunter get there in the late game, helps scale its removal up, because most of its removal is damage based, and that's really what I think Varisa is going to do. It's going to help you scale your removal up until you can get to Zul'jin, which is a very important part of Hunter's arsenal post the new standard year and Year of the Dragon rotating in. I think with most of the classes losing their Death Knights from obviously that were from Knights of the Frozen Throne, we're going to see a scenario where they don't have these kind of infinite generation tools in the late game, in particular with Hunter losing Deathstalker Rexar. That's going to be very, very different. A question from chat, which is quite interesting, from Bakos, is will the spells of Zul'jin trigger with +2 spell damage from Varisa's bow? I think they probably would, actually. So if you still have Varisa's bow active and you attack with it on the turn you play Zul'jin, I do believe it probably would actually buff those spells. That's a very good point. And actually adds more synergy to that kind of idea. So that's kind of the deck maybe where I see Varisa seeing play. I'm just not really sure that that's going to be the best build of Hunter. It looks like mid-range Hunter still should be decent, although it's losing some big cards in Diamol and Crackling Razor Maw. So whether that deck manages to keep as good a control of the early game as it did before is going to be questionable. But I think Varisa, fairly solid card. I kind of going to give it a 3 at the most. But I think it's probably closer to a 2, really just seeing Fringe play in those kind of slower Hunter decks. But yeah, the more I think about Thor Adal, the more I like it. So I'm going to go with a 3 overall for Varisa Windrunner. Next up, we have a Blewett Ron. A Blewett Ron is a 6 mana 3/4 legendary mech with Death Rattle. Summon a mech from your hand and trigger its Death Rattle. So if we think about mechs, there's Death Rattle we want to trigger. One of the ones that springs to mind immediately is Spider Bomb. That means when Blewett Ron dies, we can get a Spider Bomb on a board, and kill something of theirs, which can be fairly powerful. The problem is that we paid 6 mana for a 3/4 mech in the first place, and that doesn't seem very good. I mean, there are ways to activate this immediately with something like Fireworks Technician, but a Blewett Ron just seems really bad. I tried to actually build a mech hunter deck that could make use of all these death rattles, and the only real good death rattle to get from Blewett Ron is Mechanical Whelp, so we can get the 7/7. But I feel like we spent a lot of mana to get inferior stats to eventually get decent stats. I don't think that's not really that good. Without us the ability to abuse cards like Mechanical Whelp, with like Cube, if you could play a Blewett Ron, get it to summon the Mechanical Whelp, and then get you the 7/7, and then you can still cube the Mechanical Whelp, that would be fairly powerful. But I don't think a Blewett Ron is going to be particularly good, so I'm going to give it a 1. Next up, we have Arcane Fletcher. Arcane Fletcher is a 4-mana 3/3 epic minion with whenever you play a 1-cost minion, draw a spell from your deck. I don't want to pay 4-mana 3/3 for 4 mana for a 3/3. I don't really want to play that many 1-cost minions. The obvious synergy here is Springpaw or Halazi, where you get a bunch of the 1/1 Lynxes in your hand, and you can draw a bunch of spells like that. I mean, that's insane card draw for Hunter, but it's a lot of work to go through to do a bunch of inefficient things, to get a bunch of spells that are not really like super game-winning spells. Maybe they fuel your Zul'jin so you can play it on 10. I mean, that's kind of the idea of Arcane Fletcher here, right? But I'm just not really convinced that we want to put a bunch of 1-cost minions in our spell-based deck, and I'm not necessarily convinced that Halazi is anywhere near enough synergy to actually make Arcane Fletcher reasonable. So I'm going to say it's just a 1. Next, we have a fairly interesting card, 9 Lives. 9 Lives is a 3-mana epic spell. Discover a friendly death rattle minion that died this game. Also trigger its death rattle. So we need to actually find a death rattle minion that can die, and then that we want to trigger its death rattle again. And then we will get that minion back to our hand. So the obvious example that we could think of would have been Devilsaur Egg. That's obviously rotating out, as that was from Anguro. You can tell by the dinosaur theme of it. And so that leaves us with not that many options. I mean, the best options for 9 Lives are probably in the mech category. We could discover a Blewett Ron. I think then we would trigger its death rattle and pull the Blewett Ron from our hand. So it's kind of like 3 mana to resummon a Blewett Ron, and maybe that's why they had to give a Blewett Ron such bad stats. But then we paid 3 mana to summon a 3/4. I mean, and if we actually got the Blewett Ron on the board, that means maybe it was the only mech in our hand, which means its death rattle is going to do nothing. So yeah, I'm not that convinced. I mean, later in the game, once again, like Mechanical Whelp, you can summon a 7/7. Like Deranged Doctor, you can heal 8. There's a couple decent death rattles in the late game, but you have to get them all the way to die first, in which case you've already got a good effect, and then you're getting a bit more of the effect. And I'm just not really sure 9 Lives is... We'll find a place. It's no play dead. And the interesting thing about the Death Rattle decks is that the Death Rattles that you activated were often on... or Death Rattles are often on understated minions. So activating the Death Rattles in Death Rattle Hunter was actually an active way to gain tempo back on the board. So you made up for the fact that you were playing understated cards with good Death Rattles. Now, 9 Lives, you actually need to play these understated cards with Death Rattles, have them die, so lose the board even more, and then play 9 Lives to not get them back on the board, but get them back on in your hand and activate their effect. I mean, at best case, with a Spider Bomb, this is like put a Spider Bomb in your hand and play Deadly Shot. So it's like Deadly Shot and draw a card. Now that seems fairly reasonable, but I just not really sure that mech deck is going anywhere. So I'm going to have to just give 9 Lives a 2. I think at best they'll see Fringe play in some decks that can make use of the mechanic. I do like the card. I just really can't see a good place to put it right now. Next, we have Shimmerfly. Shimmerfly is a 1-mana 1/1 beast. It's a rare. Death Rattle, add a random hunter spell to your hand. I hate this card. I hate the design of having these stupid 1-mana 1/1s that add random cards to your hand. I don't like that. Obviously, this might be relevant because it's a beast, so it has some synergy with the Master's Call deck. It gives you some value. So with Dire Maul rotating out, and like Firefly rotating out as well, so you don't have Fireflies played against you. It means that maybe playing Shimmerfly on 1 is possible, and if you have a Scavenging Hyena, then you can play that on 2 and trade the Shimmerfly, or you can play Headhunter's Hatchet on 2 and get the buff from having the Beast on board. But it's not as good when we also don't have Crackling Razormaw. And we could have Springpaw in our deck, which is more versatile later in the game. But once again, Springpaw, even without Crackling Razormaw, is a lot worse. So I think Crackling Razormaw is a huge loss for that deck. And I'm not really sure Shimmerfly and some of the other beasts we're seeing are enough of a replacement to keep that deck around. I think the most important thing, though, is that Master's Call is still around, and that might just make these beast-heavy decks work. I mean, maybe even it's a beast-heavy deck that goes quite spell-heavy, and like Master's Call is just draw, right? And most of your beasts are kind of ways to respond on the board. If you think about it like that, like maybe we can play Master's Call in a different way like that, rather than playing in this kind of refill my hand after I splurged all on the board trying to kill you type of way. So overall, I think I'm going to give Shimmerfly a 2. I'm probably going to regret this. It's probably going to see more play than I would like it to, and it's probably going to be a bit better, but I'm going to give it a 2 because I don't like the card. Next we have Unleash the Beast. Unleash the Beast is a 6-mana rare spell. It has Twin Spell, and it also reads Summon a 5/5 Wyvern with Rush. So we can assume this is a beast, this Wyvern, for board buffing purposes. We can at 6 mana to get a 5/5 Rush that can deal some damage. Seems not so bad. That seems like a reasonable card. The fact that it has Twin Spell means we can remove something and then remove something again the next turn, and that's fairly important in Hunter, where we can't necessarily draw that many cards usually. So in a slower Hunter deck, this is good. This is very, very good with Zul'jin. One of the best things you will pull off Zul'jin, because you get the immediate effect. So I think Zul'jin is really the card that's going to make Unleash the Beast good. And I think Unleash the Beast seems solid enough in those kind of slower Hunter decks. I'm just not really sure that's the direction we want to go with Hunter, to be quite honest. So I think I'm going to give Unleash the Beast a 3. Because I think that the Twin Spell mechanic is pretty good as well in this case. Next up, we have Hunting Party. Hunting Party is a 5-mana rare spell that reads Copy all beasts in your hand. This is 5 mana, do nothing. I mean, there's some vague synergies you could get with, like, that I've heard. Copy a bunch of Timberwolves whilst you have like a Tundra Rhino in your hand. You can play Tundra Rhino and 5 Timberwolves. I mean, sure. That's like a bunch of damage, right? But, I mean, you actually can't even play 5 Timberwolves because you can only have 2 Timberwolves in your hand most of the time unless you play 2 hunting parties. So I fail to see the good synergies for Hunting Party, quite frankly. And that means I think at best, it's a tech card in Specialist, where you need to have more resource generation in a mid-range Hunter deck to outvalue control decks. That's the best case scenario, but most realistically, I'm just going to say it's a 1. Like, yes, sideboard rating is a different card. Saying that something is a sideboard card is a different rating that's not really on the 1 to 5 scale, but I think that this is still something that falls in at a 1 in most of the times, unless we can really find a very specific combo for it, and I don't think we're going to have that in this Rise of the Shadows meta. Next up, we have Ursatron. Ursatron is a 3-mana 3/3 mech. With Death Rattle, draw a mech from your deck. So a 3-mana 3/3 that when it dies draws you a card is very good. Obviously, you have to pack your deck with enough mechs to make this good. I think this is honestly one of the best mechs I've seen for Hunter. I think that if we want to build a mech Hunter deck, this is the card that kind of makes that deck viable. So I'm actually going to give Ursatron a 4, even though I don't actually think that deck is good. I think that Ursatron is the card that makes Mech Hunter viable, because it is such a powerful effect. And if you have stuff like Fireworks Tech where you can actually activate the Ursatron without having to trade it off as well, that's even better. So I'm going to give Ursatron a 4, even though I don't think Mech Hunter is necessarily that good. The nice thing about this and a lot of the other mech synergy is it doesn't have to be... You don't have to fill your deck with a lot of mechs. I mean, if Ursatron is drawing you a Zilliax in a lot of Hunter decks, that's going to be pretty good as well. So I think there's enough decent mechs out there that I want to draw with Ursatron that mean Ursatron gets a fairly high rating from me. Next up, we have Markshot. Markshot is a 4-mana common spell. Deal 4 damage to a minion. Discover a spell. Deal 4 damage to a minion for 4 is not particularly great. We've seen Hunters get away with Flanking Strike, which is rotating out now, which is 4 mana, deal 3 damage, but you get a 3/3. Now, the big difference is that actually gives you a tempo swing on the board. Marked Shot is not doing that, obviously. Now, discovering a spell is the interesting part. Is discovering a spell good enough to make up for that? Once again, if we're going for some kind of value Hunter, it works, but I just don't really see that being something we want to do. Discovering a spell is very, very versatile. Like, you can discover more aggressive spells when you're the aggressive deck, like kill commands. You can discover more reactive, slower spells when you need to, like crushing walls, which I don't think is rotating out yet. I might be wrong about that. Or, for instance, that 6-mana Unleash the Beast twin spell we just looked at. If you need to be reactive and you're playing the control role in that matchup. So I think I like Marked Shot for its versatility, but I can't really see it seeing a lot of play in most main decks. So I'm going to say it's really just a 2 for Fringe play for Marked Shot. Next up, we have Rapid Fire. A card I hadn't actually seen before until now. Rapid Fire is a 1-mana twin spell. It's common and it reads deal 1 damage. So it's kind of just a 1-mana ping for Hunters, which is actually fairly useful. I mean, we spend 2 mana to deal 2 damage in the end. That's not particularly good. We have Hunters, not Hunters, Arcane Shot, which is 1 mana deal 2 damage. That would be better in that case. We also have Bomb Toss, which is 2 mana deal 2 damage and you get a bomb, which synergizes with your mech stuff. But Rapid Fire also synergizes with Thor Adal very well, because you get 2 spells that can deal 4 damage each. Importantly, this can go face. So if we can make spell damage work, I mean, if there was a way to cheat out Malagos, for instance, this is something that could go face and would be very powerful. If you have a Malagos on the board and you have 2 of these in your hand, you can deal 4 damage plus another 20 damage from the Malagos buffs. So 24, I mean, that's not really enough to kill some body from full health, but maybe Rapid Fire can see some play. I really like the card. I like the design. Having only just read it now, I haven't really thought through most of the synergies yet. I'm going to have to still give it a 2 for Fringe. But I'm a big fan of the card overall. Let's just say that, even though I'm only giving it a 2. I would like to see it seeing more play, because I think it is an interesting card and kind of quite skill testing to use as well. So that is all the Hunter cards that we have. So overall, I think Hunter's in a pretty good place right now, mostly because Master's Call and Midrange Hunter is still okay. I think even after Deathstalker Rexar and Crackling Razormaw, the 2 big losses to that deck, alongside Diamond rotates out, there's still going to be enough there for Midrange Hunter. The deck's going to have to slow down a bit. I don't know how many times you're going to be winning with the huge Crackling Razormaws, the huge Scavenging Hyenas like we often do right now with mid-range Hunter. The deck's definitely going to lose a bit, but everyone's losing a bit in the standard rotation. So I think mid-range Hunter will still be okay. Probably still be the primary Hunter deck, although I could see a bit of a slower deck that can use like Varisa and Zul'jin and that being useful, because making use of your hero cards when you have them is very powerful, because not that many classes now are actually going to have hero cards. So I think that overall Hunter should be fine. If you have any deck ideas or any feedback that you want to give on any of the card ratings I've given, you can drop them in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube, and Twitch chat if you're watching on Twitch, and you can also reach out to me on Twitter. You can find my username there. So please like and subscribe if you're doing all of that on YouTube, or if you're watching this live on Twitch, just drop a hey guys in the chat. Until we get to the next one, Mage, cheerio for now.